Nathan Hale had built an empire out of precision and promises. He measured every decision by margins and every relationship by outcomes. On a bright weekday morning, the glass lobby of Hale Capital gleamed like a trophy, marble polished to a reluctant shine, corporate art strategically placed to signal taste and control. At 8 a.m., the building hummed with quiet success, elevators whispering, security at their stations, cleaning crews finishing their rounds. And Nathan sat slumped on a modern bench, tie loosened, his head in his hands as if he were trying to push a storm back into the clouds. He had arrived before dawn and had been at work for hours, not because anything urgent demanded him, but because going home meant stepping into a penthouse full of his dead wife's things and empty rooms that echoed with the absence of small noises. A laugh, the rustle of a child's pajama, the closing of a bedroom door. 13 months had passed since Claire, sudden and unforgiving. An aneurysm had taken her without warning, and with her went a future they'd both been sketching with soft assumptions. A house with a yard, lullabies in a small bedroom, a life that waited around the corner. Nathan's empire was immaculate and cold. Success had given him everything a market can assign value to and nothing that mattered. He was so deep in his thoughts that he did not hear the tiny footsteps approaching until a small voice said directly into the space near his knee, "Excuse me, mister." Nathan looked up, and for a second, everything rearranged itself. A little girl, not more than 3, stood before him with 2 crooked pigtails, a sun-bright pink dress with lace that had seen better days, and a lunch bag clutched to her chest like a secret. The bag was bright, cartoon smile stitched on the front, and in the lobby's polished light it looked like an act of rebellion. "Hello," Nathan said out of habit, more surprised by his capacity to be surprised than by the child. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The little girl tilted her head as children do when they are already older in their own ways than adults would ever allow, and she extended the lunch bag toward him with solemn brown eyes that registered everything and nothing all at once. "You forgot your lunch, Daddy." Nathan's chest stopped in a way that had nothing to do with the building's recycled air. The world narrowed to a single point of impossible clarity. "I'm not your daddy, sweetheart," he said, because it was the only sentence that mapped to his life with any honesty at that corner of the morning. But his voice sounded removed and a little pained, as if he were reading from a script he'd long since lost belief in. The girl shook her head with that total child certainty that collapses adult skepticism. "You forgot your lunch. Mama made it special for you." Her accent was soft. The words were small gifts. Nathan's mind tried to catch up. He did, in fact, not recall when he had eaten that morning, and perhaps this was a prank, some early riser with a sense of humor. Before he could untangle the thought fully, hurried footsteps pounded through the lobby, and a woman in a cleaning uniform barreled in, breathless with panic and apology. "Rosie, Rosie, where are you?" she cried, and relief softened her face when she found the little girl. She scooped Rosie into her arms in a way that landed with worn, efficient love. Nathan watched the exchange. The woman looked up and her face paled as she recognized him. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hale," she said, flustered. "I only turned away for a second. She never does this." There was an honesty in her apology that felt like both dignity and hardship braided together. Nathan had seen her before in the soft hours. A night cleaner who worked while he swept through deadlines. Sometimes he'd spot a small child curled on a sofa in an empty conference room with a blanket covering her, like the child belongs temporarily to the building rather than to the world. He had nodded at her then, a gesture. He had not thought about names or stories. He had thought about risk and returns. "It's all right," Nathan said, more to the lobby than to them. Then he heard the tiny girl's voice again. "You forgot your lunch, Daddy." And the words landed differently this time. Not an accusation, not a mistake, but a declaration. You are expected here, at least in someone's imagination. The woman's expression shifted when she explained, "My name is Elena Morrison, and this is my daughter, Rosie. I'm not supposed to bring her to work, but my babysitter was sick, and I couldn't miss my shift. She started doing this, calling men daddy. She doesn't understand yet. Her father left when I was pregnant. Nathan's chest twisted with something that wasn't yet guilt nor compassion. It was a recognition like a small electric shock. He had given money to charities over the years, handed out checks with signatures and framed photographs. All the handsomely arranged gestures that soothed shareholder perception and did not require a phone call back home. He had not, however, noticed the ones who were constant in his daily orbit, who had claims that weren't on a ledger. Rosie pushed the lunch bag toward him again, eyes bright. "You forgot your lunch, Daddy," she said with simple insistence. Nathan felt that he had forgotten many things. Words to comfort, voices of the morning, someone's birthmark, a face turning to him because they thought he was family. But he had not expected to be reminded by a pink lunch bag. He took a breath that tasted like metal and grit. "Do you want to be sure?" Elena asked, trembling between gratitude and the pragmatics of a woman who'd had her share of closed doors. Nathan surprised himself by saying, "Actually, yes, I haven't eaten." The words were small and very human. Rosie's grin cracked into a delight that made the lobby's echoes seem luxurious. "I told you, Mama." "I told you," he forgot. Elena glanced at Nathan with an uncertainty that invited trust rather than demanded it, and she said slowly, "My shift is over in 20 minutes. We usually take a little walk in the park across the street. Would you like to join us?" He nodded because something, the absence in his penthouse, the echo where a laugh should be, had made the rational parts of him quiet. 20 minutes later, sitting on a park bench with the city as a polite blur behind them, Nathan ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich from a plastic bag like a man resurrecting a small domestic ritual. Rosie ran between swings like a comet, Elena sipping coffee from a thermos, the trio an accidental tableau of repair. "I'm sorry for what she said," Elena murmured eventually, an offering of dignity. "About you being sad. She's perceptive for her age." Nathan shrugged in a way that was more refusal than humility. "I lost my wife a year ago," he said simply. The sentence was a clean stone dropped into a deep well. The ripples moved under everything. Elena's eyes softened. "That must hurt," she said. "It does," Nathan admitted. There was a pause in which the language of money and the language of loss met awkwardly and found no grammar. "What about Rosie's father?" Nathan asked with curiosity that had the shape of permission, not interrogation. "He left when I told him I was pregnant," Elena answered. "Said he wasn't ready to be a father. He wanted a life without that interruption." There was no bitterness in the description, only the exactness of someone cataloging a survival strategy. "I work nights so I can watch her during the day. I'm studying accounting online when I can. We live in a one-bedroom apartment that isn't much, but it's ours." Nathan listened, truly listened, and felt the old, compartmentalized parts of himself falter. "You're doing a good job," Nathan said, because flattery by way of confession was all he could offer that felt honest. Elena looked at him long and then at Rosie, who peeled off from the swings and climbed into Nathan's lap with the trusting abandon of a child who had learned early that some grown-ups are safe. "Will you push me on the swings, Daddy?" she asked. Nathan felt the shape of his throat and how different the sound of his name would be if called by a child. Elena's intention was not for Nathan to step into a father role. She simply wanted her daughter to have a moment of joy. Nathan was nervous as a novice. He had no instruction manual for small hands and fast little shoes. He pushed Rosie and listened to the litany of her small world, favorite cartoons, the bird she saw that morning, the taste of peanut butter that she declared holy. The simplicity of it, a child, a swing, the back-and-forth cadence of small talk, was like a medicine he had been denying himself. By the end of the hour, when Elena gathered their things, Rosie hugged Nathan fiercely. "Will I see you tomorrow, Daddy?" she asked without irony. Elena started to protest, but Nathan's voice cut across the hesitation before she could articulate the practical reasons to decline. "Actually," he said, feeling the words as if they were new clothing that fit oddly at first. "Elena, would you and Rosie have dinner with me tomorrow? I'd like to talk to you about an idea." Elena's face tightened with suspicion, protective as a mother should be. "Mr. Hale, I appreciate your kindness, but..." Nathan stopped her with a small earnestness. No charity, I promise. No strings, just dinner. A conversation. Will you consider it? After a long, measured pause, Elena nodded. We'll come, she said. The next evening, they met at a family-friendly restaurant Nathan had chosen because it was familiar and neutral, and because he wanted it to feel unmanufactured. Rosie took her place in the booth like royalty. She recited the day's expansions like they were chapters in a beloved book. Nathan ordered simply, listened more than he spoke, and when the food arrived, he began the conversation he'd been rehearsing in his head with some version of corporate frankness softened by the tenderness he'd found on the swings. Elena, he said, I want to propose something practical. My company has a program for employees who are pursuing higher education. We cover tuition and adjust schedules. I'd like to offer you a position as an administrative assistant with room to grow as you finish your degree. Also, we provide on-site daycare. Elena bristled at the implicit charity and the fear of being pitied. We're not charity cases, she said firmly. I won't take a handout. It's not a handout, Nathan said quickly, because he had seen the moral hazard and even the act of offering help. I'm offering a job because you're qualified. You are tenacious and smart. The accounting skills can be trained. I know you're suspicious because you've seen offers that were only gestures. I'm asking for the chance to be different. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She was not entirely sure whether they were gratitude or incredulousness, or both. Why would you go through the trouble? She asked. Nathan looked at Rosie, who was coloring as if the crayons were a map to joy, and then at Elena. And he said in a voice that felt like it was refusing his old armor, because yesterday Rosie called me Daddy in a lobby, and somehow it reminded me that I had imagined a life with a family once, with Claire. I thought that dream had died with her. But being with you and Rosie reminded me that maybe the capacity to be a father is not entirely biological. Maybe it's practice and presence. Elena exhaled, uncertain but moved. I can't promise anything, she said. I don't want to be used. Nathan nodded. I won't use you. I only ask for the chance to show up for Rosie, to be reliable and to be a steady presence. If you decide it's wrong, you can tell me to leave. I don't want to pressure you. That humility, which had the smell of sincerity because it wasn't theatrical, convinced her in small degrees. Over the next months, Nathan kept his promise to be ordinary. He adjusted his schedule, placed regular calls, and was present in ways that were both simple and seismic, helping with homework, attending parent-teacher meetings, being on time to doctor's appointments, learning Rosie's favorite dinosaur and reciting made-up stories in voices that made her giggle uncontrollably. He gave Elena a job that became real work and a path to a degree, mentoring her without micromanaging. He hired a reliable babysitter so Elena could go to class, and he used his influence to make a culture shift in the company. Nighttime cleaning staff were offered better hours. Tuition assistance was no longer a PR line but a lived benefit. The changes were small to the shareholder report, but huge to the people whose lives were rearranged by them. Nathan discovered that love was not a spreadsheet to optimize, but a muscle to train. He learned to show up without conditions. He learned to ask for help with childcare with no ego. Elena discovered that Nathan had a patient side under the public persona. He was willing to untangle small domestic disasters and to listen to her ideas about budgets and about how to run a community book club in the company's break room. She saw a man who had been wrecked by loss, but who had not hardened beyond repair. Rosie thrived in that space of reliability. She came to school with a backpack she could be proud of, sat in the daycare circle with the other children, and once, in an exuberant moment in front of the class, introduced Nathan as my daddy, which made a few parents look up and then smile with relief. A year later, on a bench in the same park where they'd first sat, Nathan unfolded a little ring box. He spoke without the all-or-nothing theatrics of a billionaire's public moment. He spoke honestly and simply. Rosie, will you keep calling me Daddy? He said to Elena, will you marry me? I want to be part of this family by choice, every day, not by the accidents of fate. Elena laughed through tears, then said yes, because the proposal was not a rescue, but an offering. Their wedding was small and real. Rosie as a chief conspirator with petals everywhere, Elena radiant and fierce, Nathan restrained but joyful in a way that felt like currency finally invested where it mattered. Nathan kept many vows beyond the symbolic ones. He attended PTA meetings, he learned to cook a few meals Rosie loved, and when Claire's birthday came around, he would bring flowers to the cemetery, but also to Elena's mother as a gesture of an expanding family. Years later, when Rosie asked in the quiet of a bedtime that had become routine how her parents met, they told her the honest story. They told her about a pink lunch bag in a cold lobby and a man who was not ready to be a father, but who was willing to learn. Nathan would always glance at Rosie and, with a small grin he reserved for private moments, would say, "You saw something in me before I could see it." It was true. A child's simple insistence had cracked the armor of a man who had thought his life was complete in numbers and deals. The family they created was not the one Nathan had planned with Claire, and yet it was perhaps better because it was chosen again and again. The final image lingered. That lobby bench reflecting morning light, now dusted with the memory of a pink bag. A laugh stitched into the city's hum. A man who had been saved not by wealth but by the courage to be tender. And a little girl whose small act of generosity as a lunch bag rearranged a life. If this story moved you, remember that sometimes the most unlikely connections become our deepest families. A tiny kindness can open a whole world, and showing up is the bravest thing any of us can do.